Hopefully I'll see you soon. I'm planning to go by the test. And I sent out a text message.
How are you?
We have a problem in the city with people not exercising enough, and that includes myself. But walking is not as complicated as going to the gym. It's not as complicated as putting together a pickup basketball game or a pickup soccer game. It's something that you can do on your own or with a partner, and it's tremendous exercise. And I can attest from firsthand experience, not so much my own, but my mom's, who had several ailments and issues physically, and began walking when she really could no longer play tennis. She was an outstanding tennis player, actually won the National Mother-Daughter Championship one year, and but she had a rheumatic heart condition. And I must have been advised by a doctor along the way to start walking, and she became absolutely devoted to it and would do it 2.5 miles on a daily basis, often through rain and snow. And I watched the extremely beneficial impact that it had on her life. And I've seen the beneficial impact that it has on many lives, not just, as I was saying to someone in the audience in the conversation, not just in terms of what it does for your heart rate and for your physical health, but what it does for your mental health and your emotional health as well. I truly believe, I mean, I am a passionate advocate of exercise, wish I could do more, but the connection between body and mind and spirit, I think, is very clear for all of us to see. And so the more that we can be leaders here in getting people in Fall River to take advantage of the wonderful walking trails that have been put together, I would assume by you and your friends, the better for the city. So just to sum up, and my thanks to everybody involved in this project, because clearly that's one of the goals for the city going forward. Economic development, extremely important. Improved schools, extremely important. Safer, cleaner neighborhoods, extremely important. But also quality of individual lives will be greatly advanced if we're walking more, exercising more, feeling better about ourselves and our community. So I once again thank you, and thank you. You are obviously devotees, just staunch advocates for this, and I want you to know that I support you, and everybody involved here at City Hall with me supports you, and the most that we can do to make this a great success, we will do. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Hear from you. What brought you here tonight? How about just a couple of people? I'm going to ask John, who I used to work with at the Diabetes Association. John, can you tell us why you're here tonight?
Well, it's important, obviously, as was stated, that people get enough exercise. So, as part of the Diabetes Association, obviously our mission is to educate people and get them to exercise, but also to eat right and to prevent diabetes, which is, in this area, is one of the highest in the South Coast. And this particular area or region of the country is the highest in the country for diabetes. So.
Very important. How about yourself?
Well, I would say I love sport when I was young. I do all kinds of sport when I was in high school. And since I was a kid, I always on the road driving. I never get a chance to walk. Since I started walking last year, I love it. When I work 2 jobs, I have time to walk. We take my break walk like 2.5 miles every day. My boss encouraged me to walk, and it helped me lose some weight too, and also made me feel happy. And I hope everyone start walking. It's really good for your health. I encourage my mom. She's 70 years old. She has a lot of health issues. I asked her to walk. I will walk with her, and hopefully we can do something about this. That's it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. How about George?
Well, I live at the George Cattell Heights, and this spring they brought in some gardening kits for us, raised beds, so we were able to start some small gardens, and I enjoyed doing that. And I help doing some of the landscaping around the building. I help out the maintenance people, but what I like to do is that, well, I mainly walk the Lafayette Flint area walking route, but I expand that sometimes. It's like almost 2 miles, but I sometimes go a little bit further, but sometimes I like to walk up Pleasant Street all the way to the end and all the way up County Street. But one thing I like about it, I get to meet a lot of people, and there's a lot of businesses along the way that I never knew existed. So I get to know where, you know, places there where I could bring my car or whatever. But just walking around, it's you get to see a lot of interesting things. Like there's a lot of monuments in the city in history that I just moved here 2 years ago, so I'm getting to know Fall River quite a bit. But there's a lot of, you know, wonderful monuments, you know, here. So you never know what you're going to discover by walking.
Very good, very good. All right. Anybody else dying to? Steve?
Yeah, that's interesting. I grew up in the Flint, and I can appreciate how much is there. But I can't believe it was 40 years ago I left graduate school in '75 in New York City, and of course New York City is a great city to be a pedestrian. Not so good if you have an automobile. Public transportation and walking is really what gets you around the city. And when I came back to Fall River and was finally able to purchase a house, I bought it just a couple of blocks from here in downtown Fall River, thinking that this really is a great neighborhood to walk around. It's historical architecture, the Art Association, the Little Theater, the Historical Society, all are close by. And lately, our neighborhood association, which includes the space that we're in now, plus you know, all of the Lower Highlands, historic downtown, has been promoting pedestrian pathways to the waterfront to keep the waterfront and the neighborhoods connected, so that people that want to walk to get to there. Right now, if you're a pedestrian and you want to get down to the Heritage State Park, it's not an easy thing. So we've looked at the possibility of linkages that could make that happen, safe walking, pedestrian, and bicycle-friendly linkages. Unfortunately, the rail system has given a $25,000 grant to the city, and they now have a vision that shows a pedestrian footbridge from Turner Playground to Heritage State Park. And I think that that will be a great opportunity for people to, and particularly the Children's Museum and the YMCA, where those kids don't have a lot of open space. So if we can get them to walk down to Heritage State Park, enjoy the festivities that are there, the park that's there, and then safely walk back to the Y or to the Children's Museum, we've got a great opportunity.
You know, this is great hearing this interest, and of course you're here because who would come out on this crazy night? But we are looking, there's been talk, there's been things written into plans, city plans, open space plans, about having a pedestrian master plan for the city. So these are all great ideas, and we will be looking at the end of this meeting to form an advisory board on a pedestrian master plan. So I hope, you know, that some of you will step forward. I want to just give a brief overview of why we are here today. The Mass in Motion Municipal Leadership Grant began in 2008, and it seeks to improve policy, systems, and environments in order to motivate residents to engage in healthier behaviors. I like the saying, you are where you live. So if your community ensures that healthy food is available, that it works to make the parks clean and attractive and safe, and walking enjoyable, the results will be a healthier community. Mass in Motion is a very small grant, enabling the city to hire one point person. My job is to work with the city administration, city departments, residents, and like-minded organizations such as Partners for a Healthier Community and Healthy City Fall River. Now, when you talk about work on policy, what is that? Well, I was the chair of the Open Space and Recreation Plan, and that was back in 2010. And in that, we kind of rejuvenated the idea of the Quikasham River Rail Trail. And now that is becoming a reality, as you probably have noticed as you drive on 195. That is going to be a huge benefit to walkers in this community. Systems such as increasing the share of walking, cycling, and using public transit so that we have alternative forms of transportation, and we are reducing some of our use of the automobile. And that will improve air quality, it will improve safety, and it will improve economic development. And finally, environments. Out of Mass in Motion came Fall River Park Advocates, now a sustainable effort in doing yearly park cleanups, and an Adopt a Park program where a dozen at least parks have been adopted by community groups, by neighborhood associations, and others. A new grant came to entirely expand the efforts of Mass in Motion. From this little $50,000 grant, $440,000 a year has come to the city. It is powerful because of what money can do. And so the city has subcontracted with STAR, the Stanley Street Resource Advocacy and Treatment Program, to really look at the entire issue of diabetes, preventing diabetes, obesity, and hypertension. And so there are two components to this grant. One component is an expansion of the Mass in Motion effort, not only to change and improve infrastructure, but also to get people out walking. And that's a huge part of why we're here today. But also, there's a clinical piece. And I'd like to introduce Paula Beaulieu from STAR, who is the director of this grant, to just say a few words, Paula, about the clinical component.
Sure. Thank you very much, Julie. We at STAR were thrilled to be approached by Mass in Motion, the city of Fall River, when they did this grant, to be the clinical partner for this. We're working on a previous grant, a present grant, that is trying to improve the health of people with mental illness and chronic illnesses. And we really, part of that was really embracing walking, because we thought that was a really good thing for folks to do. And we do 7 walking groups a week. Some of the folks have walked like over 1,200 miles since we started. We do indoor and outdoor walks. But one of the great opportunities with this grant is that we're able to even further expand, what we've been doing. We're using a lot of your great maps that you developed through Mass in Motion and handing them out to everybody at STAR. But we're going to be able to bring on community health workers who can actually work in our health center and have folks that have pre-diabetes and diabetes and hypertension referred by their doctors and providers. The community health workers will be able to work one-on-one with these folks and go out into the community with them to help them with shopping, help them with cooking, and help them get tied up with medical appointments. So we're going to have 2 to 3.5 community health workers working out of STAR, and we're also going to have a community health worker working out of Health First as well. So both of the health centers in Fall River will be able to have additional help and community health workers to work with folks. We're really going to be focusing a lot on the pre-diabetes. There's a huge number of folks that have pre-diabetes, don't even realize it. And one of the evidence-based programs that they found is that there's the Center for Disease Control has a diabetes prevention program, and they've found that people that have been able to go through that program have really been able to not develop diabetes. So we're going to be partnering with the YMCA in Fall River. They have folks that are certified to run the diabetes prevention programs, and the community health workers will be referring folks to the YDPP program, and hopefully that will be a big benefit for the folks in our community. Another piece of this grant is that we're going to be able to do electronic referrals between the health centers and the YMCA. So rather than the providers, saying, why don't you go to this program and hand the person a piece of paper and maybe, that's kind of the end of it, the doctor will actually be able to make an electronic referral directly to the Y. The Y will have the information and they can really work on reaching out to the folks. So it's really a great opportunity that we're able to really tie in all the great work that Fall River has been doing in the community with promoting health with the clinical partners in the community as well. So we're really excited.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Julie.
you. Introduce Eric Andrade, who was hired by STAR to be the community prevention coordinator. And he has worked with myself on the Mass in Motion for the past year. And some of you are here because he twisted your arms to get you here. And he's been working on mapping with senior champions, two right here, Richard and Laura and Marcia, and in the back I see Kathy Duclos. All of these people have been helping to make Fall River safer for walking. And I'm going to turn it over to you before I say anything more.
Okay, great. So I came on board in 2014, right after I was getting out of college, to work on a grant from the Massachusetts Council on Aging that was originally focused on two senior centers, with the Niagara Senior Center and the Flint Senior Center, to really work on improving walkability around those two key areas. When we started the grant, we quickly found out that it could be expanded, so we expanded it to citywide around all the senior centers, improving walkability for seniors, with the idea that it would trickle down and be walkable for everybody. So ultimately out of that, we did 6 walk audits of the city with lead from Wendy Landman, who did an initial walk audit at the Niagara Senior Center, and she trained our senior champions who went out almost every week in the summer in the heat and were really committed to being out there. And as a result of that, if you look at the crosswalks in the city now, they are what we call piano key or zebra striped painted, whereas before they were typically just 2 flat solid lines. So it's really an effort that was improved in the city and something that is cost effective. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money in the long run. It's not changing, implementing thousands of dollars of curb cuts, but it's something that people can see, people notice, and it impacts the community. We also got the Niagara Senior Center to be fully changed. We got striping down the roads on Tucker Street in a crosswalk on the road where the Niagara Senior Center is, where there was not one before. So that definitely helped out people for there. And then we also, out of that, created these maps, which a lot of you have seen already as I've passed them out, hundreds of them, but just mile-long or so routes around the city that feature some of the beautiful places that a lot of people don't even know about that we have in the city, such as Berlin Park. We did one of the walk audits there, and I remember the senior champion saying, wow, I never knew this place existed, and that's right behind the police station. So just that whole idea. So these maps were the original. And then we started a second grant that was started this year. It's a little bit delayed because of all the weather. And that was to plan a 5 to 15 minute walk to a healthy market. That was also an MCOA grant. And that was to we worked with the senior housing sites. We surveyed many of the senior housing sites and said, do you shop at a local market or do you shop at a large supermarket? Does your doctor recommend walking? How many do you walk a day? What is your perception of the closest neighborhood market to you? And we got some pretty interesting results from that. And out of that, they are going to the printer now, but we came up with 3 different maps. There's a map for St. Anne's and Corky Road neighborhood. There's a map for the Flint and Niagara neighborhood, and then there is a map for the south end on the Tiverton border. And each of the maps specifies 4 markets, 4 local healthy markets that you can get fruits, vegetables, healthy meats, healthy dairy, enough to make a healthy meal out of. And it spotlights the walking distances from the senior housings to each of the different markets, and the markets are on the back. And Julie, we're passing around some so you can look at. Then that brings me to the new grant, which is the 1422. So I am employed through STAR and working with Julie on component 1 of the grant to really get out there and expand upon creatively what we have been doing. So we have some really exciting new projects that we're going to be kicking off. One that starts tomorrow, just put together, I'm really excited about, is the Walktober Challenge. So starting tomorrow, it's going to be a challenge issued to the city of Fall River. Any resident can participate. And what it is you sign up with your email, phone number. I'm going to create a Google document that will keep track of how many miles you walk, and you set a goal. Say you want to walk 20 minutes per day. You want to walk half an hour a day, a mile a day, whatever you want to set. You set your own goal, and you try to meet that goal every day, every week. You call or email it into me, I will log it, and then we will keep track. And it's just a walking challenge. It gets you out there, it gets you exploring the city that's healthy. So that starts tomorrow, and that goes till October 31st, and I will be setting up a Facebook page. There are flyers outside and in here as well with the social media information.
Just when Jessica's here. So.
Yes, and Jessica Robinson, who's in the back, she'll be helping us because she's a great social media person, so I'm sure she will be helping me with that to get some outreach, because it'll be greatly appreciated.
I'm kind of lost, but kind of here.
And then also we're doing so much. And then also there will be Walk Fall River, which is a new website that was put together by Dr. David Weed. He is currently filming in the back. I just want to put the screen on really quick.
Multiple media approach to this, but we need to inform all 88,000 people in this community about the various opportunities for walking and to keep that updated. We've started with this page, which you can go home and go to now, or if you're on your phone, you can go to it right now. But it's walkfallriver.org, and we're going to be advertising that all over the place. So in the next few years, everybody in town will know about Walk Fall River. This is on top of the Greater Fall Rivers Partners website, so everything will start with GFR Partners, but this directs you to all of the resources there. And we'll continue to add to that. Eric and I were talking earlier today that we'll be adding a specific page for upcoming walking events, so that will be updated regularly as new events occur, and people can log on to that quickly. You'll notice that we've included things like the sort of bus routes, so you might say, well, what does riding a bus have to do with walking? Well, anybody who takes a bus understands. The bus doesn't come to your door and take you to the door. You got to walk. And we encourage people to use bus routes as a way of improving their walking, extending the distances that they can go. One of the posters you've seen on the outside is a couple of women who extend their walking by taking a bus to a location and then walking back home. So there are lots of ways that you can integrate buses into walking. You've all seen the Fall River Walks maps. I think we have some available for people here. And of course the Bike Fall River route, which we could do a whole page on Bike Fall River, but we already have a committee who's doing that and encouraging people who want to bicycle. So we want to link to that so people understand that that's yet another way. I was kidding earlier that when I go up Plymouth Avenue, I get off my bike and walk up. If it's steep, you're going to do some walking, right? And then, as Eric pointed out earlier, we did some Walk to a Healthy Market. We created a senior map specifically for seniors with some similar locations, a little less challenging, but helpful. And Julie pointed out the senior champions we have. Over the summer, we have gotten in touch with a variety of people in this community who make walking, like Richard and Laura, a regular part of their activity. And we extended that to, how many people here know Yvette Mancini? Okay, about half the town, I think. Okay, Yvette doesn't walk so much, she swims. Okay, so we decided to extend some of this. We have George's garden in this. Gardening is another way to get exercise, and of course several bicyclists and Barbara Berry down on the bottom right.
One of the cyclists.
There's Frank, right over there. Okay, we got your page right up there. So we have some stars in the room, and you're going to see these pictures all over town. This is a way of showing people that there are people, some younger than I am, a lot of people much older than I am, who continue to walk and really maintain their health that way. So this is a big part of this whole process.
The champions that you see before you range in age from 51 to 98.
Right.
So it's the whole.
Maybe Yvette will crack 100 at some point here, and we can feature her. And then the last three are simply pages about other walking opportunities. We have Marcia Picard here, our school wellness coordinator, who has been doing a superb job of getting children in the city walking. The International Walk to School event will be next Wednesday. We're the only school system that we know of in Massachusetts who for 3 years in a row has had every single school walking on these days. And we do that twice a year, but we also have 2 walking school buses that happen every day at 2 schools, at the Doran School and at Laterno, right? So that's the way to teach walking, is to get kids walking, so as they grow up, they don't, and we know that your generation isn't interested in driving automobiles anymore, so we're ahead of the game here, getting people to walk more. There are several nature walks in the city. Anybody want to name one? Where can you go for nature walks inside the city limits of Fall River? That's not it.
Bioreserve.
Maybe you can get me back to the page, pardon me? The bioreserve. Half of this city is woods, okay? And there are trails out there. They're not fancy trails yet, but we may get there at some point. But there's certainly places you can go for a walk. You can go out in the woods and Dave goes out there on occasion fishing, taking pictures and things of that sort. There are not many people out there, are there? Right. So
it's not half, it's more like 2/3 of the city's woods.
A
Big
very
area.
large
There's
portion
a
of the
big
city.
area on the other side of the water that nobody ever sees.
Right. So there's a lot to be explored and discovered there. And Julie's been working on Cook Pond, a wonderful walking route down there, about a half mile, right at the end of Amity Street, just past the Henry Lord Community School. And then BCC has a wonderful walk around their pond. So we want to get people to discover these places. Richard, you were saying that you go up to Cook Pond because it's quiet, it's nice, no traffic. The boardwalk is another fabulous place for people to walk in the city, and you know that's where we get the out-of-towners. You know, half the people walking on the boardwalk don't live in Fall River, they live in Somerset, because they come over here for our beautiful boardwalk, which is being restored, and by next spring will be a brand new boardwalk, okay, all the way. And then finally, fundraisers, and I'm sure people here have been involved one time or another in a fundraising event. We're going to promote them, but people can think about this as, you know, a way to incorporate walking and a good cause along the way. So all of this will be on the webpage and more as we go with this, and that's the story.
So another aspect that will be on the website is we want to advertise any upcoming walks that may be happening. That's a work in progress. I know one of the things that we want to do is do a walk every neighborhood in Fall River program. So working either with the neighborhood associations or any people in the community who want to do a walk in their neighborhood. So we will be launching that too. I know I talked to Sophia about wanting to do one in the Flint, so that could be a very good possibility because I think that needs to be done. And then also one of the main points of this is to form the Walking Advisory Committee to really, as part of the 1422 grant, get out there and be advocates so people can have opportunities like this to get out there and enjoy Fall River safely in a community, walking, being healthy, and living an active life. So at this point, we can introduce Wendy Landman, Executive Director of WalkBoston. She is going to explain to us, and she did this at the Niagara Senior Center training where we learned how to do walk audits, and this is going to be kind of a pedestrian advocacy 101 to really explain what to look out for when you're out there. And you learn with your eyes to see, okay, maybe this isn't up to par, and you start to think of the city in a whole different way. I know I do. I look at every crosswalk I see now and say, that is not painted correctly. Shame on the city. So it definitely changed my mindset, and I thought, there probably isn't much more I can learn, but there was. So just a brief bio on Wendy. She has served as the Executive Director of WalkBoston since 2004. She led the organization's growth into a statewide advocacy presence and works with leaders in state and municipal government, as well as the nonprofit community to broaden the impact of WalkBoston. Among WalkBoston's ongoing initiatives are technical assistance to municipal staff and local advocates, design review of transportation, smart growth, and development projects around the state, community safe routes to school programs, a leadership role in complete street efforts, and programs to train new populations as walking advocates, including public health staff, teens, senior volunteers, and local public works staffs in urban and suburban communities. Wendy serves on the board of America Walks and is a member of the coordinating committee for the National Everybody Walk Collaborative. Prior to joining WalkBoston, Wendy was planning consultant for more than 25 years, with a focus on transportation, land use, and master planning, and management of large environmental impact assessments. Wendy holds a SB.
Bachelor's.
Oh, okay. Bachelor's of Science. SB, Bachelor's, and Master's of City Planning degrees from MIT, and a diploma in Urban Design from the University of Edinburgh. And without further ado, here's Wendy Landman.
Great, thank you. So I'm really glad to be here this evening and glad I made it. I like to walk and take transit, but to drive here was quite the drive today. Anyway, and it's so exciting to hear all the things that are going on in Fall River. It's just amazing, and I love hearing people's personal stories about why they walk. And I think that's one of those things we sometimes say to ourselves when we're walking. It's hard to explain. It's so pedestrian, you know. Everybody does it. It's hard to get people excited. So I'm really thrilled to see many of you wearing walking buttons, and to see this Fall River moving towards having a group of people that are going to work together on walking. And I think there's a lot has been happening, but there's more to do. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about the fact that and Eric did a good introduction, that really, when we think about walking at WalkBoston, and our name is WalkBoston, but we really do work all over the state now. And I've actually been in this room before, a few years ago, as well as working with the senior champions. We really work on both walking, getting people out walking, and walkability. And walkability is what the term that we use for the built environment. So that's the kind of thing like well-painted crosswalks. But there are a whole bunch of other pieces, and that's what my little slideshow is going to go into, to talk about some of the things to think about in the built environment and some of the things to work on in the city to make sure that Fall River really works for everybody. And one of the things that we like to think about is there's an organization called 880 Cities, which is really, if a city works for children who are 8 and people who are 80, then it works for everybody. And walking is a really important part of that, because for all the reasons that all of you have talked about, walking, being able to walk safely and to feel comfortable walking is so important to every piece of your personal health. But it's not just your health, it's actually the health of your community as well. So we have a little show that we do called Good Walking is Good Business, because we often go and talk to chambers of commerce and local economic development organizations to convince them that they too should care about walking. And I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful about walking and working on this issue, is that it makes you feel good, but it also makes your community feel good. And town centers or downtowns that are walkable have a stronger retail base. Housing values are stronger in neighborhoods that have good walking conditions. Healthcare costs are lower in communities that have good walking conditions. So really, walking goes into a healthy community as well as healthy people. One of the things that's wonderful about Massachusetts is it's one of the states in the country that really is working on walking. Mass in Motion, which Julie described, has been a program in existence now for 7 years, which is kind of amazing. And we are really at the forefront in the country about thinking about walking, and thinking about walking at a very local, nitty-gritty level, because that's where changes get made. And one of the things that we were very excited to work on in some of the work that I do with America Walks and others is working with the Surgeon General of the United States, who about 2 weeks ago issued something that's called a call to action on walking. So only every 2 or 2.5 years, the Surgeon General of the United States declares that it is time to really spring into action on a critical public health issue, and the health issue that he just declared now is on walking. So you guys are right in the sweet spot of where the national public health community is thinking about what do we need to do to make people in the United States healthier. So I think the timing is great. The federal agencies that look at transportation, that look at housing, that look at the environment are all thinking about walking and walkability. So the timing is really great to work on this. So with that, let me just, you want to be able to walk to things like stores, to parks, to schools, to the library. All of those things are a component. Sometimes you want to go and just take a walk in a park, and that's wonderful. But in order to build it into your everyday life, we need to think about how how destinations are embedded in our communities. Oops. Is this on a timer? Maybe I just touched it. So, walking allows people to get where they need to go. And when we think about walking connections, it's sidewalks and it's crosswalks. It's all of the components that go together. And then, as I've said, destinations. And that means variety. So when people take walks, they like to walk in different kinds of places. You want to walk in commercial areas, you want to walk you want your neighborhood, residential areas to feel walkable. All of those pieces hang together to make a walkable environment. And one of the things that is important to think about is amenities, which don't have to be big and expensive. They can be things like banners. They can be things like stringing up lights that really change an environment after dark so you feel like you're invited. One of the things when people talk about the places they love to walk, there's a sense of delight. So you want to enjoy what you're looking at. So you want to see different things. You want to see other people, unless you want to take a solo walk in a park. And you want to feel invited to be in a place. And all of the things that are listed on this slide go into making you feel invited. And then we turn to the nitty-gritty pieces, which is, as Eric mentioned, well-painted sidewalks. So if you look at that sidewalk with those piano keys or zebra stripes, it's really visible to drivers. That is really, really important for pedestrian safety, as are the kinds of signs that you see here. The one on the right, which is, we call it a stanchion, which sits in the middle of the street, is actually one of our favorite tools for improving safety. It is, it's almost as good at getting cars to yield to pedestrians as traffic lights, but it only costs about between $300 and $400. So this is a really important tool to get people to slow down and to yield to pedestrians and crosswalks. So it's something to think about when you're out walking. If there's a crosswalk where yielding behavior is bad, this is something to think about, and it's a small investment. Maintenance is a really important piece of the environment for walkers. Maintenance means trash. When we worked in some of Boston's low-income communities and did a survey of what were the disincentives to walking for people, the #1 issue that came up was trash. And the reason is not so much that the trash is actually in your way, but rather that it makes a place feel unloved. And if a place feels unloved and uncared for, it feels unsafe and people don't want to walk there. So the level of maintenance is really important. Not perfection, just making a place feel cared for. And of course, snow clearance is a hugely important issue here in Massachusetts, and one that this is one that really takes the whole village, the whole city. It's the responsibility of many, many different actors, and it's something that a lot of communities think about and need to work on together. It's something that we haven't gotten to perfection in Massachusetts by a long road. And it's really important to remember, and I think all of you know this, that there are lots of different environments that are nice to walk in. We don't actually have a picture of a park here. We should, but that, of course, is another place that's good to walk. And this is basically what the list that I went through at the beginning, and the slideshow will be a resource for anybody, for the committee and others to have to sort of keep in mind. But I think that issue of it's all of those things. It is health, but it's also the environment and finances and the cost and the sense of community. All of those things that go together. People who live in walkable communities are more likely to participate in local government. I mean, there are just so many ways in which walking brings people together. And of course, part of that is that when you're out walking, you see your neighbors and you get to know your neighborhood. If all you do is get in your car and drive someplace, you may not even know your neighbors. But if you walk around, you get to know them. So this is kind of a wonky slide. But what this is really saying is that when you live in a community like Fall River, where you have an interconnected street system, that's really much better for walking than sort of cul-de-sac suburban communities. So you guys are starting from a good place. You have the backbone for a walkable place because you have an interconnected street network. Road design. This is another thing to look for. So, does anybody want to hazard a guess about what's wrong with this for pedestrians?
There's no
There's no crosswalk. And what's something else about this picture? It's like a really long way to cross that street. Right? So one of the things that we think about a lot is how wide the streets are. And are they just wide enough as they need to be to serve the purpose, or are there ways to shrink the streets? And sometimes the shrinking of the streets, I'll come back to that, is as little as painting lines on streets. So one of the ways to slow cars down is to paint what's called a fog line or an edge line on a lane. And as you narrow the space where drivers feel like they're supposed to be, they slow down. So when you have streets that are overly wide, to actually narrow them and move the curbs, that's a big, expensive project. But to paint lines and to show drivers where they're supposed to be, so for example, to paint lines that demarcate the parking lane, just doing that visually slows drivers down. It's one of the reasons that the stanchions in the middle of the street work, because they're in the middle. Drivers see a narrower space that they have to drive through, and that slows them down. And on city streets, this is a really important way to think about slowing traffic. And so I'm just going to back up a little, because this is an important slide. This is the probability that a pedestrian will die if they're hit by a car at different speeds. At 20 miles per hour, almost everybody survives. At 40 miles per hour, almost everybody dies if they're hit by a car. So slowing traffic down in our cities and thinking purposefully about the speed of traffic in cities is a hugely important piece of thinking about the pedestrian environment. So what we're starting to see in the United States, and what's been happening for a number of years in a number of countries in Europe, is to talk about slow speed zones, like neighborhoods, where there's no reason for people to be driving fast through neighborhood streets, and those slow speed zones are 20 miles an hour. So there are lots and lots of neighborhoods in different countries around the world that are slowed traffic down to 20 miles an hour. It's something that New York City is doing. It's something that a lot of cities around the country are starting to do. I think the city of Boston is considering it, and I'm pretty sure that Somerville has put a couple of slow speed zones in place now. So this is not going out and doing this to the major arterials. This is, but within a neighborhood, you set a zone that makes sense and really slow traffic down. Because when you slow traffic down, everybody is safer. It also makes it easy for people to bicycle. When cars are traveling slowly, it's fine to have bicycles and cars sharing the road. And in fact, I grew up on a little street in the suburbs where we played in the street. And that was a slow zone without any formal, it's not like it existed that anybody called it that, but when you have streets with low volumes of traffic and slow speeds, the streets feel very different and they function very differently. So that's something that we think about a lot. So going back to sort of some of the methods to tame traffic, these are called curb extensions. I'm sure you have some in Fall River. I can't point to them, but I bet Julie could.
There are few.
There are few? Okay. So this is when you pull the corners out a little bit further, and it shortens the crossing distance for pedestrians, so it makes it easier to cross the street. It narrows the street for drivers so that they slow down when they come to the corner. And you can build sort of completely built ones that are relatively expensive, but you can also do it with paint. So this is one of the ways that you can start making changes in the environment to use paint, to do temporary fixes and see if they work. But this is an important traffic calming method. The crosswalk issue, the signage. And this actually was an illustration of a raised crossing. Again, do you have them here, Julie?
No.
No.
Because of, well, the thought is the snow plows.
So that, we can get over that.
Yeah.
They're all over Massachusetts now. And this is when you have when you're on the sidewalk, when you cross the street, you stay level and the cars go up and over. So for a while, cities were installing speed humps. Those are hard on cars and they're hard for snow clearance. But raised crossings are much more gradual. They're being used all over the place now. They really slow traffic down. They really say to people that are driving on that street, there are pedestrians here, there are going to be people walking here. You need to drive as if there are people walking here. And for accessibility, for the pedestrian, I mean, it's terrific, because then you basically have level crossings, you don't have to go up and down. It's a really important, another really important tool.
Wendy, the stanchion thing though, you brought that to our attention, and now they are all over the place. It's really wonderful that, you know, the traffic division has sort of embraced that idea, and the striping of the crosswalks.
Yeah.
I know that Laura was out on Plymouth Avenue shaking her finger at the engineers out there to make sure that they were going to put in the zebra
It's great.
strip.
It's great.
So
yeah, I think one of the things that really helped, so Federal Highway did a study of different tools for traffic control, and it was their study that said that these little $200 or $300 things were 80% as effective as a new traffic light, which is a very significant, expensive thing. So they're really in use all over the place now.
Are there guidelines for replacing those? As a driver, and I always question, or I'm always concerned about when I see those in a broken lane thing where you can pass, because if someone's passing and all of a sudden they're coming to one of those signs, or changing lanes.
Well, they're most often used in places that are just one lane in each direction. Okay, but if there's somebody stopped in front of you, and where there's a crosswalk, you should never pass them, because there's. I mean,
No, I've seen them in a two-lane, one direction, one direction with a crosswalk, and it's a dotted line so that people can change lanes to make left or right turns, and it's right in the middle of the lane. So if someone's in the middle of changing lanes and doesn't see that, for example, if they're behind another car and going over to make a left turn.
I mean, I haven't heard of that as an issue. I mean, they do get hit.
I mean, I haven't had personally a problem with it, but it always kind of startles me when I see that.
I mean, the thing about them is they get knocked. They're knocked. You know, they can be knocked over. So
Sure.
they don't damage the car. I mean, certainly they don't last forever because they do get hit. One community where I just did a walk audit, which went and installed some of these a couple days after the walk audit, they actually had volunteers in the neighborhood to walk sort of each corner. Somebody volunteered to sort of be the caretaker of that sign, so that, for example, if it snowed, they would pull it in or something like that, and they would pay attention if it got hit and knocked over or something. But I mean, I haven't heard of it as an issue for drivers hitting them. So, and on-street parking. So, does a couple things. When you have cars parked on the side of the road, when you have on-street parking, that slows the traffic down. It's just, as a driver, you know, you see the friction, there are things going on, and you just slow down. It narrows the visual space of the road. But the other thing is, for pedestrians, it creates a barrier between you and moving cars. And that actually makes it much more comfortable to walk. So next time you're out walking and you're on a sidewalk that doesn't have parking or any kind of buffer between you and moving cars, think about how it feels and then compare that with how it feels when you're walking when they're parked cars. So this is actually a tool to think about, allowing on-street parking in places where you want traffic to slow down and where you want to tame the traffic.
And a big advantage today is on streets like Bedford Street that didn't have parking. When the cars and trucks come by and hit the puddles, I had to go all the way to the building to get out of the way of the spray. Had there been parked cars there, that wouldn't have been an issue.
Right. Relatively unusual, but useful. So then, now I'm going to talk about some more pieces that go into an environment that works for pedestrians. So one is countdown signals. I know that you guys don't have a ton of them yet here in Fall River. They are now the standard. So when you put in new traffic signals, they should have countdown signals. Just gives pedestrians much more information. It makes really significantly reduces accidents. So it's an important element of a walkable place to have countdown signals. And there's also something that goes with countdown signals called a leading pedestrian indicator, and that means when the traffic signal, when the lights change, the walk signal comes up 2 or 3 seconds before cars get the green to go to travel in the same direction, so that pedestrians that are crossing the street can get out in front and they're much more visible to cars. So if they're turning vehicles, it makes it much safer for pedestrians. Passable sidewalks. So this has to do with a combination of things. Some is just my favorite installation of various pieces of utilities in the sidewalk. As I've said to a number of engineers, if that thing was in the middle of a traffic lane and you left and said the job is done, you'd be fired. I mean, you can't do that. So on sidewalk, I'm not sure why sidewalks feel like places where you can leave pieces of utilities when you're redoing a sidewalk or moving things around, but anyway. But much easier to deal with is things like trimming hedges. Again, when you're out in your neighborhood, look around. That sidewalk with the hedges growing over it is just as impassable to a person on a wheelchair as if there's no sidewalk at all. So thinking about that, keeping sidewalks clean and free from obstructions. Curb cuts and driveways. So when you have a wide open curb cut, a great big wide driveway, cars can round those corners and pull in it fast. That is really not good for pedestrians. You really want tight driveway entrances with what's called a tight turning radius. The closer to 90 degrees, the better. If it's wide open, if you have a curve, cars can drive fast around the corner. That's true at street corners and it's true at driveways. Really important. It's one of the things that as communities start moving towards having a more walkable built environment, it's one of the things that we start seeing changes in. So we did a walk audit in Chelsea last year, and one of the things we noticed is that they have places which are, you know, auto-oriented businesses, so there's parking in front of the businesses, but where they'd actually tightened up the turning radius, and instead of having wide open, you know, you can pull in anywhere along the way, they'd actually turned it into a place where you had to come in through an opening and tightened up the turning radius. It made a big difference. It wasn't necessarily, you know, the most elegant place, but from the walker's perspective, you feel much more protected walking in a place where there's a tight turning radius. The other thing that's really important is to have a level sidewalk. So cars have to come up and over the sidewalk as opposed to having the sidewalk going down at every driveway and up. It's a sidewalk. The pedestrian should be given precedence so that the car has to slow down when they're turning into the driveway. Just delineating pathways. The slide on the right is one of my favorite. That's just a path in a parking lot that the business operator delineated and said, you know, human beings are walking from the store, I think it's a big box store, to the cars. That makes it much safer. Again, it's a small thing, but it's really important. And I just mentioned tight turning radii. So that's a really, really important way to adjust the walking environment for pedestrians. It does lots of things. It slows cars down when they're turning the corner. It makes the crossing distance shorter. Obviously, the one on the right, this is a place where the community went in and did a retrofit that actually they moved the curb and they added some landscaping, and that's lovely. But you can also do this with paint and some of these rubber stanchions. You know, if you want to slow the traffic down that's going around that corner, that will do it. So there are a lot of cities around the country who, you know, our streets were designed with cars in mind for a long time, and so there's a lot of retrofit to do in a lot of places, and it's not so cheap to do it, but there are inexpensive ways to do that, and this is one. And then where you have the space to create some separation between cars and walkers, and whether it's a, my husband is from Ohio, they call them tree lawns. I don't know what the right, but the little verge, you know, a landscaped area. You want it to be wide enough so the landscaping lives. You know, if they're little teeny skinny things, it doesn't live. But, or if there's not space for that, sometimes just adding a trim strip where you put the signs and you put the various pieces of equipment that you need along the street. And then making a street feel comfortable for people. So benches, trash receptacles, public restrooms. When we talk with seniors about what are some of the issues that prevent them from walking more, sometimes it's the lack of public restrooms. So thinking about that and making sure that the community has the amenities that go with the walkable environment. And then I just wanted to end with a couple of pictures of some of the walking champion groups that we've worked with. So that's what hopefully some of you are going to be more of. I mean, Fall River has a number of them, but I think what we see is that communities where people are talking about this and caring about it and talking about it in City Hall and with their, their elected officials and municipal staff, both of those are really important. And so some of the places where we've done this are in Gloucester. So you're not alone in needing to work on the walking environment. Every community in Massachusetts. Weymouth. Weymouth is one of those places that somebody in City Hall, I'm guessing in the 1950s or 60s, went and widened out every corner. So even on little tiny streets with 5 houses, there's like this turning radius, like a giant truck could go around it. It was crazy. We did a whole bunch of walk audits with folks in Weymouth, and by the time we were done, they were all like, no, we know. Again, it's like every street. So they have a lot of retrofit to do to slow traffic down because all the streets are just wide open. I'm not sure what happened. None of the people that did that are still around. It's a long time. They're not new. But anyway, so some of the things in Fall River are going to be easier to fix than Weymouth. Belchertown, which is out in Western Mass. There are lots of communities where really there's no sidewalk at all connecting. In this case, they're looking at a sidewalk to connect the library and the high school and some senior housing and sort of the little bit of a village center that they have, really important. And then Fall River, which we talked about, where the champions went out and got things changed. So that's really exciting. So I brought some information along that I'm happy to leave for those of you who want it about some of these issues. But Julie, questions, comments, thoughts?
My question is, I live at the George Cattell Heights, and we have I guess in England it's called like a zebra crossing or whatever, with the marked sidewalk. But there's it says like state law sign, but it's over on the sidewalk. But a lot of children cross through there, and a lot of seniors go across there because the post office is right across the street. But who would I have to talk to about getting the stanchion sign for the middle of the road? Because a lot of people just go through there. I've seen seniors in the middle of the crosswalk that are disabled,
right.
And I see cars passing right past them.
So I would say Julie and Eric are
okay.
Talk with that. They're here in the city. They're city staff, and I think the city staff has gotten you've gotten a lot of response. So it's a pretty straightforward ask.
Okay.
So
I have a question about we have a group such as this, residents, people who work here, and so approaching the city that is strapped for money, and what would be an approach that you would suggest? What have you seen in other communities? Certainly people are receptive, but there are some big issues, and I'm happy that Lisa is here from SERPED, our regional planning, because you may be able to help us with this answer.
So, I guess one of the things that is important to do is to start by coming up with some priorities. To think about where you want to focus your energies and where you want the city to focus the energies. Because if you go in wanting to fix everything all at once, it's kind of everybody will throw up their hands. So one of the reasons that we have a number of the solutions in the slideshow that are inexpensive is to talk about the options that communities have. And so one of the things I brought along, which I sort of showed you, Julie, but I'll leave with you, which is everybody can download on our website, is we just put together a report on low-cost strategies for improving pedestrian safety. So there are a lot of things that communities and even neighborhoods can do on their own at very low cost. So I think one of the things to think about is what are the critical issues. So if you have a pedestrian committee, come together and talk about what do you want to work on first. You have a lot of things to build on. You have all these walks. One of the things WalkBoston has been working here in Fall River also on is a MassDOT bike and pedestrian safety program, and we've been working on the walking piece, which focused there's data about what the most dangerous spots are in the community. So that's certainly something to think about where to start, and some of those pedestrian hotspots, they're called, places where there are a number of accidents. So there's data, which probably, I don't know whether Serpa generated it or collected it, but the other thing is the police, they really know. I mean, they're the first responders. They know the places that they end up going to regularly because there are accidents. So that's often a place to start. So that, you've started working with seniors, I think. So hotspots, places that serve seniors and places that serve school children are often good places to start. Lisa, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say we're actually in the process of generating a new top. We list the 100 most dangerous intersections in southeastern Mass. Number 1 again is still Rodman at Plymouth, but that's fixed already. So hopefully in a few years we'll see the statistics come down. But we have the top pedestrian locations and the top bicycle crash locations. So that'll be out within the next few months. And we're always available to help do studies. As far as money for infrastructure, we program the TIP, which is the Transportation Improvement Program. Those are bigger projects. But through the, and I think you know this, Julie, through the enforcement grant, we got Laura Ferreira. Forgot how many of those signs she put in for, but she will be getting a bunch of those, so you'll be seeing more of those in the city as well, and some additional signage.
And another piece that I know Julie knows about, but the state has a new program, let's call it the Complete Streets program, that we think that the final program details are going to come out in early November, that will give communities who adopt a Complete Streets policy, and that's one of the things that's being worked out, exactly what has to be in there and how the city has to adopt it. But basically we'll give communities the opportunity to apply for infrastructure dollars for exactly the kinds of improvements that I was showing in the slideshow. So that program is hopeful, assuming that Fall River moves forward and adopts a Complete Streets ordinance or policy, that then the city can apply for those monies, which would then go towards projects that are getting funded through your regular Chapter 90 dollars, which are the state dollars that flow to all the communities for transportation improvements. So there's starting to be some infrastructure money that goes toward this, but I think really having a strong plan and thinking through where you want to make improvements and where you'll have the most impact. So I know, and I mentioned those three, hotspots, children and seniors. The other thing is downtown, the place where the most pedestrians are, where you want to sort of build on that sense of community and sense of place where people come together, or the parks, some of the things where a lot of people are affected by it. Sure.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Well, Wendy, I want to thank you for coming all the way down in this terrible weather. Great audience.
Yeah.
And we'll be continuing to work with Wendy on, as we go forward, and with STAR and SERPED, our regional planning agency. So what I really ask you to do before you leave is to sign the attendance sheet. There's 2 sheets out there. One is attendance and one is the Walktober sheet. So please be sure so that we can contact you and keep you informed and invite you perhaps to our first community advisory meeting when we begin to get that off the ground. So I can't thank you enough for coming out tonight and for being such attentive listeners. This was pretty technical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you feel like when you go outside, you'll see some of the things. And are your emails somewhere in some of the materials that are handed out?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, send Julie or Eric ideas you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like George's about that sign.
Yeah.
There have been many cases. Actually, there's one down by the Mitchell apartments that we're concerned about. So, and we call it in, and they, sometimes you have to stay on top of it, but you see interest and concern and willingness to be helpful. So, great. So please, again, everyone sign something before you leave, sometimes twice. Thank you.
Keep walking, Fall River.
Yeah, that's right.
Good luck. Good luck to our